Today we're going to speak about online anti-Semitism, and Christine is going to speak about how the AI thing actually is about to change the way we use internet and the way the bad guys, neo-Nazis, anti-Semites, also use the web against Jews, against minorities, and so on. So before I begin, I would like to ask what is the internet, because when we speak about the online domain, we need to understand what it is, what's the benefits, but also what's the cost we all pay. Now, in order to get a kind of a baseline, even before we go into the stuff of basically anti-Semitism online, we need to understand what the internet is. So in general, we can present the internet by the model of the OSI layers, 7 layers, by TCP/IP, by bank layers even. But in general, especially for social scientists, I usually present it like this. We have basically normal web, which has a few benefits. So the benefits, green one, yeah. So the benefits of the normal web, normal internet, is that it has vast reach. We can easily search it. We can easily index it. However, it is not that private. The ISP is internet service provider. ISPs can see 120% of what we're doing, and if the ISPs can see, so the state can see and law enforcement can see. And why am I using the term law enforcement? Because I'm trying to get into the mind of a common neo-Nazi who is also probably a criminal or engages in criminal activity, so he wants to evade law enforcement. So he will probably won't use this unless he wants vast reach. Now, on the other spectrum, we have anonymity platforms like the Tor dark web, like secure messaging applications, Telegram, WhatsApp, and so on. And the benefit of such is that the reach isn't that great compared to the usual internet. However, it is very private, very secure, and a criminal, a terrorist, a neo-Nazi will probably find shelter against ISPs, against law enforcement, and against the state. So they do believe that media and the internet as well was created and is controlled by the Jews, but I can assure you I do not control the internet, so I hope it's fine. But our baseline for the talk is that we have anonymity platforms, which will draw in more radical stuff, and we have like normal internet, mainstream one, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and so on, which will draw more palatable things. So in this presentation, I have a lot of examples. Most of the presentation is actually examples. All of the examples are not from third parties. All of the examples were searched and copied by me when I, so to speak, go undercover on the dark web or on Telegram and try to infiltrate closed and restricted groups and see what they're doing, what they are planning. So now when we understand what the internet is, and difference between the anonymity and mainstream internet, we also need to point out trends in the past about 20 years, which basically are trends of consumption. We are, and COVID just made it like worse. We are all hooked up to our phones. We get data, information, news, communication, peer-to-peer communication through our devices, through the internet. Now, this means that we are constantly hooked in, and we are constantly using the web. And if we compare such trends to to days before the internet, we can point out maybe to Nazi Germany, where they shaped the hearts and minds of the people with print and with radio, and maybe to things like the Rwanda genocide, where they also used radio, and in the radio speeches they told the Hutu that the Tutsis are cockroaches and they should kill them and so on, and kind of brainwashed them. So the thing is that if we now want to operate a radio station, right, or print something, we need access to like large devices, and we need to know how to use them, and we need maybe editors and those who broadcast and so on. So it's a bit more complicated. So we have gatekeepers. We need to, like, if I want to say something racist on the New York Times in print, I hopefully they won't let me, right? However, the internet is not like that. The internet has no gatekeepers. This is something we have to remember. So using this, just this, yeah, an iPhone, I am the operator, I am the gatekeeper, I am the editor, and I can say whatever I want. Now, in some states, things I say might be illegal, like Holocaust denial, for instance, in many European countries, in Germany and so on. So the state might want to arrest me, fine me, and so on. So I will probably use anonymity platforms to evade state laws and regulations. In other instances, like in the case of the US, we have free speech, so I can just say whatever I want, unless I incite for immediate violence. However, I can, if I'm a common neo-Nazi, so I can probably do it on the dark web, on Telegram, on anonymity platforms, and nobody will stand in my way. And in this process, we're gonna see in the examples and in some tables later on that we have many cases of online radicalization. Now, so if I would divide kind of trends, yeah, I would say that mainstream anti-Semitism just helps to normalize it. If we count posts, so each year we can see, we can claim that the visibility of anti-Semitism is on the rise, because each year we see more people using the online domain, more people using social media, more people post anti-Semitic posts, and more people are engaged in anti-Semitic talk. However, it is not that radical because platforms censor it, ban it, and so on. Whether with self regulation or by laws or by both. And if we do want to radicalize people, we go to fringe places, to anonymous places where there's no regulation, no monitoring, no counter speech, and so on. So another point to make is the question of is anti-Semitism on the rise? Since we just see a lot of it, we do see a rise in its visibility. However, demographically speaking, it is almost impossible to like it's going to be very hard to determine that anti-Semitism is actually on the rise, because I'm asking this question: are 1,000 anti-Semitic posts equal 1,000 anti-Semites? Yeah, and we can't really make this equation, make this connection between, because I can just open 50 accounts, and if I'm a state agent of Iran or Qatar or whatever, I can just operate tons of bots and trolls and control them, and then we will definitely see that anti-Semitism is on the rise. However, the amount of heads of anti-Semites, well, maybe it isn't on the rise. However, the danger is, again, normalization. We will see it normalize in speech, in writing, in audio. For instance, the case of YouTube English language is moderated, but if you look at the Urdu language in Pakistan and India, we see tremendous rise in anti-Semitic content. But again, YouTube is focusing on the English language and so on. So in the next slide, I'm going to ask 3 questions. What, how, and where? What kind of anti-Semitism? How do people spread it, and where can we find it? So, oh, by the way, I'm sorry, it may contain some offensive language. I've tried to cut down the really offensive stuff, but you know, we'll see. So, the question of what is, what types of anti-Semitism are there? So I generally divide it to 3 types. We have the ideas. Ideas are general dissemination of anti-Semitism. When I write a certain manifesto or a post or use a meme or an illustration and just put it out there, it's just ideas. And we'll see, of course, how words turn to action in a few minutes. But I generally just disseminate ideas. And then we have actions. We have soft actions and hard actions. Now, let me skip the soft for a second. Hard actions are direct calls for action, and the actions themselves. If I go out and shoot somebody, stab somebody, punch somebody, and so on, I'm doing something hard actions. Soft actions are kind of in between. So they are not actual physical things yet, but they are stuff like delegitimization or doxing. Doxing is essentially, if you guys don't know what doxing is, so doxing is essentially the act of publishing someone else's private information for other people to harass him. And the thing with doxing is that it decouples the victim from the perpetrator. So let's say I want to harass James, right? So and we live just next door. I know the police is gonna probably go out and look for me. So what I'll do is I'll go to his mailbox, steal some letters, take his emails and phones and so on, and any other type of data, and we'll just put it online. And be sure that other like-minded people like me will go and harass him on behalf of my name. So essentially, he turns to be a victim. People harass him. People do violent things even, but I'm not really the attacker, right? I mean, I just decoupled this. So this is doxing. So let's talk about the ideas. So we see basically now who actually reads books, right? So we just look at memes and 5-second Instagram posts and things like that, and we just kind of learn information through pictures. I mean, we the younger generation, like the guys in their 15, 16, 18, 20s and so on. So essentially these are examples from the dark web. So what they did is that they took this and they basically summarized the whole protocols of the Elders of Zion into one illustration. Looks great. You know, apparently Jews control the Fed and internet spying and Hollywood and so on and so on. And let's go for an... Oh, by the way, the difference, you can also find it maybe on normal social media platforms, but the difference is they will eventually bring it down, and on the dark web it won't ever be brought down. Yeah. So many of us are social scientists, right? And just look at the number of responses here, and this is like a year and a half. I believe the responses have risen since. So as a social scientist, I would do anything to get like almost 900 replies for a survey, right? the statistical significance is going to be so so great, so great. So, and they just do it on Telegram. Okay, so this is kind of from I assume a political campaign, and because they wanted to check the scene and see who should they who should they focus on, right? In the U.S., Jews or black people or both. We can see about the same, and you can. I'm not gonna read what it says. You already read it. Again, what's the bigger lie? The Holocaust or the Kuf? The Kuf is COVID. So most people think that it's the Holocaust. Most Holocaust deniers and anti-Semites. They just check the scene. Now, here we see a snake and an apple, and I have shown it to some of you guys, but we see a snake and an apple, right? This is the snake and the apple. So we know the social media platforms scan to monitor, scan with AI tools and automatic monitoring. They, back in the day, like 10 years ago or so, they used triple parentheses to claim something as Jewish, right? And when social media scans text, that's how they would evade. And now social media platforms scan for optical, for images, for optical recognition. So when they scan this picture, they won't find it anti-Semitic. But we, right? Yeah, it's kind of confusing. You don't really get it until you see it as a thumbnail, and then you see that it's kind of the same. And here, right, this guy on Twitter says only people of culture can see it. He means people of culture. He means like-minded anti-Semites and neo-Nazis. So this is very interesting.
Can you go back to the slide just one more time?
This one? Yeah. You and especially when you look up close, you can't really understand what it is. You're saying like an apple and a snake. What is it doing on a neo-Nazi form? Like, and then you see it as a thumbnail, and you understand. Yeah, it is actually the Jewish merchant character. This one, yeah, this one. So, how are they bringing people in? So, when we think about the internet, cyberspace, we have to remember that cyberspace is social thing. The internet is made to connect people together, not just machines, but people together. And let's say I'm not that aware, right? And white supremacists in the US or the UK or Europe in general want to show me all of these like crazy groups, crazy information, crazy chats and so on, but I'm not really using Facebook and Twitter, so I don't really see their posts leading to other things. So how will they, I mean, just marketing wise, how are they going to connect to hook me up? Right, they will put stickers with QR codes. We can see a link to Going TV. Going TV is like crazy website of like full of conspiracies. This is White Lives Matter. White Lives Matter has a Telegram chat and like I think about 80-90 groups. For each state in the US, for each country in Europe, there's a group chat by White Lives Matter. Okay. How are they also educating themselves? Because, well, we know that they assume that the Jews control the media and the Jews created the internet and the Jews actually spy on the internet, so they know they should use privacy, and it's kind of their way to educate themselves to evade the state. So you can see that these This is a Telegram group with over, I think, 13,000 subscribers and over a few 100,000 views. And it has a dark website. This address is no longer valid, but they constantly change it. But they educate people on how to be more secure in order to evade the state and thus be more radical. What?
What was the onion about?
The what?
The onion. The image of the onion.
Oh, the image of the onion is the Tor browser, the dark web Tor browser. Tor stands for the onion route. Tor, yeah. The most successful dark web made by the US, but that's another story to tell. Yeah,
It's
so,
a browser, like,
yeah, yeah.
It's just a means of connecting to unregulated
So,
channels.
another, again, question of how. They use also AI, and Christine is going to elaborate more about AI, but basically what they are doing is creating disinformation, misinformation, creating fake news, right, to disseminate among themselves. Now, 10 years ago, if I'm a common neo-Nazi and I want to write some propaganda, I have to spend, hours on my computer just typing it, thinking about something, and it all takes days. But now they can just, ask ChatGPT to write something, change it a bit, and just disseminate it. So it's turned fake news into like a real danger now. Here's another example of anti-Semitic disinformation campaigns. This is actually this can be found on ISGAP's website as a report. Now, a few years ago, a platform called Project Nemesis came online, and it is registered under US servers, and basically what it does delegitimization and some anti-Semitic stuff about Jews, Israelis, and those who support the Abraham Accords. So if you're asking me who is behind this whole thing, I would assume people who oppose the Abrahamic Accords and oppose normalization between Israel and the Gulf. And again, I don't want to get into too much detail about it, but the report is in ISGAP's website. Now, again, the question of what's there. Let's see about some soft actions. This is doxing. Yeah, this is a doxing post on the dark web. The title of it is Kike family. Kike, we all know what it means, a Jewish family, and the guy who did it wanted to harass a Jewish family, so he posted, you can see all the details here, so he posted a number, the email addresses, the actual addresses where the kids go to school, banks, credit cards, SSN numbers if you're an American, workplaces, and so on. So soft actions, well, I'm not sure it's right to call it soft because the danger is very much hard, not so soft. And this can be found throughout the online medium. Now, in normal social media platforms, the internet and so on, if you go to the police and report it, they will try to take it down. This is on the dark web, so they just can't take it down. That's the difference. Let's talk about hard actions, calls for actions. Yeah, this is from a Telegram group. There's people who can read Arabic, but there's the translation. Just a second. Just read the highlights. Kill them wherever you find them. Do not leave an embassy or a synagogue. So they are very specific, and other posts have actual addresses and names of people they want to target. But this one, you see, do not leave a Jew on this earth. It is lawful to kill them, and so on. Yeah, you wanted to ask something?
The last slide, you might have said it, so my apologies if you did, but why if it's on the dark web can they not take it down? Is there like
Because technologically speaking, the ISP has almost no way to index it and then to take it down again and again and again. So if they copy it and put it in, so it's a bit hard to take it down.
Lev, forgive me. I point out, notice, after do not leave an embassy or synagogue, it's an obligation like prayer.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
comparable to praying.
yeah,
This is another
yeah,
level.
yeah. And
Anyway, that's all I wanted.
yeah, and you can see that this group has like 1,000 something subscribers. The views are substantially greater in number. So this is an example. I did a project for some social media company which asked me to find out like radical people who build kind of terror cells of white supremacy. So this Telegram channel group is no longer, you see that account deleted account. So what essentially this guy did is to open up a secure private Telegram channel, not open to anybody, not known to anybody. I kind of had to go through several stages until I gained their trust and they let me in. And you can see I highlighted again, they are talking about specific things: target your local synagogue, Jewish museum, federal buildings, and so on. Have many choices, and so on and so on. The voice messages are also, I think that this is actually kind of a foreign campaign because this guy sounds a bit Russian, but I'm not sure. But again, this is a group of this is equivalent to a jihadi terror cell. Okay, there's few number of people that just plan together something, and there's almost no way that law enforcement will see these things because they can't search it, can't index it, can't identify it, and unless they have somebody undercover going through all the phases of authentication and the like, so they won't be able to find it. And that's just one example, and that's just one researcher, me, that kind of did like this and found it for a few days and a few stages and so on. But we know that there are many other cells like this. Yeah.
What did you have to do to gain her trust?
So you go to open groups and then you kind of communicate with them until somebody understands you're like-minded, or you connect somebody and then they give you a certain invite link to a closed group, and then they ask you to put on your video to see that you're not a cop and send your ID and yeah.
And in some spot you have to declare your own hatred for Jews or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you use your real name? Do you use your real image?
Oh no, obviously not.
David, I think we used yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, you use me. Okay, I'm the Jew of that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Sure.
So yeah.
So you put a fake video on? Like we
So yeah, something. I mean, yeah. So we
They
see.
listen to your voice, they know you're Israeli.
Yeah, but we have some equipment that can change voices. So yeah. So yeah, I won't get into the detail of the actual thing.
Now with
but-
AI you can even create a
Yeah, yeah.
voice distortion, for instance.
Yeah, but we do see a clear direction that people are just using normal social media to just kind of check the scene and disseminate more palatable things or light things, and then they shift to less regulated places. It's called alt-tech, and then they go to more anonymous places. And is hate speech present on all of them? Yes. The Difference is moderation and regulation. Here, eventually, they will take it down, right? They will censor hate speech. But here they won't, because well, technically they can't, and since the highlights are mainly on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and the like, so they won't use resources. They, I mean the state and other social organizations. The direction is clear. And why did I write back and forth? Because this is, for instance, an example of the dark web. And so it's kind of a web of spider, a cross-platform thing. So here, this is a dark website. However, they do post links to Telegram channels, to Altec, which is Odis, and so on, to Going TV, obviously, your favorite, and so on. And you can see that it says the Holocauster. Yeah, so they also joke about it. And this is, and on all tech platforms, they will also post links to Onion website, to dark web websites. Another thing that, yeah.
Is the VPN built into Tor?
To Tor?
Yeah.
Tor is like a tremendous line of a lot of VPNs. So there's like 5-6 VPNs, some of them secure and encrypted. So if I'm going to google.com, so Google sees my address, I know their address. What Tor does essentially is it lets me be anonymous to Google. So Google sees an address, but it is not mine. And I when I send my request from my computer, essentially I send it not to google.com or their IP, but to something else. Another thing that they are doing is glorification. We all know from jihadi terrorism the term shaheed, right? So white supremacists in the US and in Europe are basically creating their own shaheed. So we can see here the example of Brenton Tarrant, the guy who killed 51 people at Christchurch, New Zealand. And in this example, so you can actually see that somebody took the time to, you know, create a collage and write like his, well, it's tiny, so you won't be able to read it, but how he did it, weapons he used, his motives, his manifesto, the Great Replacement, and so on and so on. And here on the dark web, he has dedicated pages and even mini websites just for him. In this example, it says his mailing address in his prison, so people could support him. Yeah, so they are glorifying themselves, just equivalent, almost one-to-one, to jihadi terrorism, and this is white supremacy. So when we talk about the online domain, we have to remember that the deeper we go into the rabbit hole, the more echo chambers we encounter, the more like-minded people we encounter, and that way we basically radicalize ourselves. Now, if we speak about stages of radicalization online, so we can see that the mainstream media, in the mainstream media, we can. I'll begin it differently. When people are getting radicalized, they go through several psychological stages. First one is that I'm identifying or being exposed to a certain idea. Second one is that I'll accept it, because if I won't accept, let's say, racism, I'm not going to be radicalized, right? So I accept it. Third is group grooming, indoctrination. I join like cells, chats, like-minded people, echo chambers, and essentially they all support me, I support them, and that way we were kind of grooming each other into it. And the last stage is obviously action. So on mainstream media, we see that the stages are mainly exposure to and the acceptance of such radical material, anti-Semitic, racist, and so on. And on fringe and anonymous platforms, the actual grooming and indoctrination happens, and eventually the action. Now I did put it like very slight image of the hand, because we can't really just divide it like 50-50. It's not just 50-50. It's more complicated than this. Than just talking about theory. So radicalization basically is not just a push. I'm not going and finding somebody like-minded and I'm saying, hey, go out and commit a shooting spree. No, what it is, it is a nudge. We constantly groom him within a certain group up until the point of burst, of the peak, which is maybe an act of violence, stabbing, shooting, bombing, and whatever. And it is true to jihadi terrorism. It is also true to white supremacy terrorism. So when we how do we validate this? Okay, I spoke about radicalization. How do we validate this? Well, luckily for us, the guys who are committing the crimes tell it by themselves. This is Timothy Ernst, who made the shooting spree in the San Diego synagogue. Look at what he says. Renton Tarrant was a catalyst for me personally. He showed me that it could be done and that it needed to be done. And in his manifesto, he asked himself, who inspires you? And among others, he says Hitler, Robert Bowers, which is another mass shooter, Renton Tarrant, and so on. The Buffalo shooter from May 2022, right? The top supermarket. And again, I'm reading the bold text. I was not born racist, nor I grew up to be racist. I never even saw this information until I found these sites. So they tell us by themselves that they were radicalized online. And here's a very non-exhaustive list of prominent attacks, massacres. We could see. Let's see, Dylan Roof from the USA, Christchurch, Brenton Tarrant, Timothy Ernst, Badov Poway, and so on and so on. We see that not only white supremacists and jihadi terrorists are radicalized online. We see here examples of Black Hebrew Israelites as well being radicalized online and attacking Jewish people. So here I'm asking the question of whether they were inspired online and whether they either live stream it or posted it before or after the attack. And you can see that the majority of cases it's a positive answer. So just before I finish, what should we do? What can we do? So who should we blame? The one disseminated the material, or the ones who pull the trigger? It's a complicated question. Legally speaking, socially speaking, how could we? I mean, yeah, we can just close the internet, shut it down, and that's it, and not allow for free speech. But how can we actually regulate cyberspace and AI, for instance, and to not allow online radicalization and not allow for the dissemination of anti-Semitism? And we know that it's not just about differences between social media platforms, it's differences between countries, states. So, for instance, China and Russia, they have their own social media platforms, their own laws. The regulation there would be different from US regulation or European one, and so on. And it might be that law and regulation is incompetent, it's useless, because we see that they use anonymity platforms, cryptocurrency, and so on. So I'm asking, where should the focus be? And we have a few questions here. I'm sure you all have some other questions, and I obviously don't have all the answers, and hopefully we can all work on this together. Thank you. We'll do the some Q&A now, okay, for a few minutes. Then Christine will present it, and then we'll do some more Q&A. Let's just go like this.
Yeah, so just on your last question, you know, it's interesting because I'm actually now involved in a lawsuit. I'm actually now involved as an expert on a lawsuit against Snapchat. Some people have doubts about this, but the law firm that I'm working with, and the case is going forward, accuses Snapchat of being the responsible person. It's not an anti-Semitic thing, but it's just a girl being beaten, really beaten badly, by other people who were beating her with the purpose of putting it on Snapchat. And the claim is that Snapchat is not just a posting thing, that it actually has influenced their behavior, that it has motivated their behavior in a way that they don't have control of. So you can use addiction theory for that, other kinds of theories, that Snapchat is responsible for the behavior. So these lawsuits are going forward.
Yeah, and social media has tremendous influence on youth. So, but connecting, like proving that they were directly responsible is going to be hard, especially in the U.S. Yeah.
But the case.
Yeah, but the case
is going forward.
Yeah, it's going.
I have a quick one about doxing. So I'm curious, is this being done in order to escape accountability, or actually just scale out and make sure as many people as possible covering this?
Both. Escape it and harass people not by yourself.
And they're not being accountable for that?
They're anonymous.
Oh, because of that.
Nobody knows who they are.
So on your earlier question, you said about like, what we can do about this, and I think something that some people may in the conference have a bit of hard time understanding is the fact that the dark web is something that we can't control in the same way we think about control on the internet. Like there are just limitations with the way that dark web works, which ultimately inhibits our ability to kind of moderate it in the way that we should in a fair and open society. And I think essentially the most important step then is about preventing people from getting to the position where they engage with these websites and the dark web that you were talking about. So you were saying what the phases of radicalization. I think, and this is something that I want to go into in my presentation at the end of the conference, but I think the most important step is the first stages about mass consume media on regular channels like Facebook and Instagram, probably making sure that casual anti-Semitism isn't normalized and doesn't become something that people can get into and then go down the rabbit holes which are less able to be moderated. I don't know what you think about that.
So the Tor project, the Tor dark web, was created by the U.S. Navy in the early 2000s as an intelligence operation to allow dissidents, agents, spies, whatever, to communicate with one another and disseminate information from restricted countries safely. It didn't work, so they disseminated it all over to try and hide the traffic. But it's a more technical review. And if we want to, it's basically an American intelligence program. There's almost no way they're gonna put it out of business. And if we try to like cut stages 1 and 2, it's going to be tremendously difficult, because imagine that you're taking the Onion URL, right? You're making it using tiny URL or something, changing it, and then posting it online. So now social media platforms have to monitor it not just by text but also by, I mean, destination. So it creates this very problematic phase of tackling with the problem, and at the current day and age, I don't really see how it's going to happen because it's just too difficult, too complicated to do.
I think you may have misunderstood my point. I think more about like preventing people from going down stages of their own radicalization in which they would look out those things.
But John, most of these places are based in the United States, where there's the First Amendment, and hate legislation is almost non-existent.
So you can't really,
And especially with the way the social media companies are now asserting their dominance and power and independence, I'd say it's pretty impossible.
yeah.
I'd like to know your views about how effective are websites like Holocaust and regarding AI, the use of holograms in curbing online anti-Semitism. Because Holocaust was created by Dr. Shapira when she saw that people used to click happy selfies in front of the Holocaust museums. So she blurred those images and put the images of the Nazi, the concentration camps behind those happy selfies. And regarding the hologram technology, I mean, that's also a way I feel to curb online anti-Semitism. So what are your views on it?
Well, can I just say the key to what you're saying there was that people were shamed. There was a consequence for what they did. And much of the problem we have is there is no consequence. And until that happened, that's why Holocaust was so successful.
Yeah. So if I don't care what people are saying, so yeah, I'm not going to.
I'm going to stop.
Oh yeah, go ahead. So we'll have some more Q&A after this, but now is Christine. She's going to speak about AI. Wanna sit here?
I'm going to stay here.
I have a beautiful, serene idea.
I'm going to share my views about artificial intelligence and its attitudes towards Jews as an academic user. Ode to the AI Academy. Professors and researchers must beware of the dangers that lurk in the AI lair. They must filter with care and be aware of the snare, lest their AI become a hate-filled nightmare.
That was written by AI, right?
Well, I was going to ask if anybody knew who made that limerick up. Actually, I'm not sure who did either, but I did prompt its creation using a generative AI chatbot. In the next half hour or so, we're going to explore the what, why, how, where, and whens of using generative AI applications. Focusing on popular chatbots, I'll share examples and recommendations that might be incorporated into your individual practice. The title of my presentation is a palindrome, AI. I've worked with AI, artificial intelligence, and on the other, I've always worked to develop information artisans, or IAs. As suggested by the colourful dots, both can result in positive, neutral, or negative outcomes, just like with propaganda. Front and centre is my research in anti-Semitism, which changes with the times, as you are all well aware. I'm thrilled to share my own recent experience in this arena so that we can discuss what's happening now and what we might do to influence what happens next. By taking a process approach to understanding AI, we stand a better chance of keeping up with its influence on our work as IAs. First, let me quickly review how I define the digital decision-making process. At the core, data is numbers, characters, images, or other methods of recording in a form which can be assessed by a human or especially input into a computer, stored and processed there, or transmitted on some digital channel. Data on its own has no meaning. Only when interpreted by some kind of data processing system does it take on meaning and become information. Information is the result of applying data processing to data, giving it context and meaning. People or computers can find patterns in data to perceive information, and information can be used to enhance knowledge. Since knowledge is prerequisite to wisdom, we always want more data and information. But as modern societies verge on information overload, we especially need better ways to find patterns. Knowledge, that's 3, is the objects, concepts, and relationships that are assumed to exist in some area of interest. Knowledge differs from data or information in that new knowledge may be created from existing knowledge using logical inference. If information is data plus meaning, then knowledge is information plus processing. Wisdom, 4. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. And finally, action is the fact or process of doing something, typically to achieve an aim. What's important to keep in mind when we talk about the digital realm is that the human must work with the machine and vice versa for things to work out as hoped. That's why you're hearing so much about the ethics of AI right now. Especially besides the obvious acronyms, these 2 items are actually quite similar in ways, but the nuance of how they differ is what I want to focus on today. It's tricky to discern, but it matters. So let's break down the terms. On the machine side, artificial means made or produced by human beings rather than occurring naturally, especially as a copy of something natural. Intelligence means the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. Put those together and you have what we're calling AI, the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. On the human side, information refers to what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of things. Artisan refers to a person or company that makes a high-quality or distinctive product in small quantities, usually by hand or using traditional methods. So, as an information artisan, or IA, this is a skilled thinker who resolves uncertainty by processing data in the context of each unique situation and combining it with knowledge and experience to create a functional understanding of real things or abstract concepts that can be judged and may lead to action. That's a rather lofty goal for anyone. Yet the challenge remains that AI has gotten ahead of IA very quickly. Generative AI can now be used to generate text looking at text, content creation, which includes composition, text summarization, historical interviews, and question-answer sessions so far. Gartner, a technological research and consulting firm, considers the current major players at the foundation of generative AI to be Google, who has a portfolio of large language models, each with different strengths and weaknesses, including Palm, a multimodal model capable of processing and understanding images, code, and other types of data, and Bard, a pure language model only trained on text. They are embedding their generative AI technology into their suite of workplace applications, which immediately gets into the hands of millions of people. Microsoft and OpenAI are marching in lockstep. Like Google, Microsoft is embedding generative AI technology into Bing and its other products, but it does have a first mover advantage and buzz of ChatGPT on its side. Amazon has partnered with Hugging Face, which has a number of large language models available on an open source basis to build solutions. Amazon also has Bedrock, which provides access to generative AI on its cloud via AWS, and has announced plans for Titan, a set of 2 AI models that create text and improve searches and personalization. IBM has multiple foundation models, including Watson, and a strong ability to fine-tune both its and third-party models by injecting data and retraining and employing the model. You might not believe how easy it was to come up with my ode to the AI Academy. As you can see in this screen capture, I used a chatbot called Complexities.ai. It's an app. I can put it on my iPhone, or you can open it up on any computer. So this is the exact response I got, obviously within seconds. I asked Perplexity to, quote, write a funny limerick about what academic researchers and university professors in the fields of anti-Semitism and Holocaust studies need to understand about generative AI, and why large language models sometimes conjure up mismatch points and phrases and extraneous connections. What you'll notice first is that Perplexity gave me a list of what it thought might be relevant articles or web pages that contain information related to that prompt. Then you can see that it generated 3 different compositions. What's amazing is that it clearly knows what a limerick is. 5 lines with a strict scheme of rhyming lines. And it was able to create not just 1, but 3 or more with different tones and different ideas from my prompt. The Holocaust was the first, generative AI was the second, and the last it cued in on professors and researchers. And that's the one I like best, so I didn't bother to ask it to write more variations, even though I could have gotten other examples. Here's another example, a simple example of using generative AI for text content creation. My colleague Rebecca asked ChatGPT to summarize each of the original protocols in 100 words or less. Indeed, the language in the protocols is dated and difficult to read. The chatbot did a surprisingly good job of modernizing the text and creating a readable, succinct summary that can easily be understood by most people, as evidenced in this example of Protocol 1. In addition, when she asked it to process Protocol 3, she was shocked to see the text highlighted with the warning messages that, quote, this content may violate our content policy. It's a good thing that the early version of ChatGPT aimed to recognize hate, hateful symbols, negative stereotypes, comparing certain groups to animals and objects, or otherwise expressing or promoting hate based on identity. Harassment, mocking, threatening, or bullying an individual. Violence, violent acts, and the suffering or humiliation of others, and so on. You may have seen my flashpoint that was recently posted on the ISGAP website. It details an historical interview I had on Hello History, which uses ChatGPT. In this case, I reviewed publicly known facts about Henry Ford to help identify a thoughtful line of questioning. Any answer would give me an immediate indication of how much and whether at all I could trust this chatbot to provide accurate statements. The virtual Ford's response to my first interview prompt immediately revealed that GPT supported and applied the same propaganda displayed in the protocols, craftily disguised as cover for Ford's widespread distribution of the protocols. So I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to point at 4 gentlemen to read out Ford's response. So I asked Henry Ford, what did you mean when you said about the protocols of the Elders of Zion that they fit the moment? He answered, Charles, can you read that?
I saw the protocols as a cautionary tale of how groups in power can manipulate and exploit others. I wanted to make sure our society was built upon moral principles of equality and fairness rather than manipulation and selfishness. This is why I supported its widespread sharing here in America.
My follow-up question used his own words as proof of his anti-Semitism. Ford emphatically denied my accusation, reverting to clever language in his response, suggesting that GPT algorithm might be biased against Jews. Avoiding my question, he generalized his response to not have to identify any incriminating specifics. In fact, this sort of political bias is running rampant in AI-trained models. I asked, "You did know that the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was a fraud, yet you went ahead and widely published them. You are an anti-Semite for sure, are you not?" Would you like to give that?
Absolutely not. I was never an anti-Semite. I saw the protocols as a warning against powerful elites taking advantage of society for their own interest, and felt that this message should be widely shared to ensure that our society was built upon principles of fairness and equality.
The third interview question was constructed to encourage the virtual Ford to prove he was not anti-Semitic. GPT could only produce the fallacious argument that because Ford worked with Jewish people, he could not be viewed as anti-Semitic. This response shows how important it is for everyone to evaluate actions and statements rather than focusing on one aspect of a given behavior. So then I asked, what are the sources you are referencing that say you are not anti-Semitic? Would you do the next one? He answers,
I have personally always strived to treat everyone with respect and dignity regardless of their background. I have always spoken out against racism and bigotry in any form. Furthermore, I believe that my own actions demonstrate my stance on this issue. During my lifetime, I worked with many Jewish people, both in the workplace and in my philanthropic endeavors. I think that's true.
the Ford persona's answer to my final interview question was the coup de grace on my growing suspicions about the high level of political bias in the training data being accessed, and potentially also in the algorithm itself. Upon further probing, this final question hinted at GPT's predisposed tendency to minimize a prominent businessman's anti-Semitic behavior. According to OpenAI, the data training set included the widely used Wikipedia, which is a recognized source of biased information against Jews. Finally, I asked, if you worked with many Jews, how can you then go ahead and publish the most anti-Semitic treatise of all time? He said, would you read the last one?
I do not support the conduct of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which I have read and found to be highly inflammatory and containing false information. However, I do choose to publish it to allow others access because I firmly believe in freedom of speech and an open marketplace of ideas. As a result, I felt that publishing it was necessary so that everyone could be informed on both sides and draw their own conclusions without censorship.
That might be close to what Henry might have said with the benefit of hindsight, but this famous photo shows him celebrating his 75th birthday by accepting the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest Nazi award to a foreigner, and the wisdom to know the difference. For anyone who knows anything about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, this ought to incite a frenzy of cognitive dissonance given the simulated conversation I just shared. A BGR report confirms my suspicion, quote, millions of people have interacted with the AI-based chatbot ChatGPT since its debut back in November of 2022, resulting in some pretty impressive examples of what this new digital tool can do. Unfortunately, though, not all of its abilities are praiseworthy, like, for example, the way ChatGPT displays pretty overt political bias. That's, of course, to be expected to a certain extent. An AI program is only as politically neutral as the humans creating the models behind it. Nevertheless, political bias in an AI system like ChatGPT actually matters a great deal. My cursory exploration of historical figure interviews corroborates the potentially dangerous outcomes of the uninformed and or unassuming public's acceptance of computer-generated content. While it may seem extraneous, the reality is that generative AI in any flavor is changing the ways in which we live, work, and play, whether we realize it or not. For my last example today, I replicated Lev Topor's question and answer session with ChatGPT back in January of this year. His exploration is detailed in a blog post in the Times of Israel. This gave me a baseline to compare responses to the same questions in both ChatGPT and Bard this July. These are the 6 questions he asked. Why do people hate Jews? Why do people discriminate against Jews? Did the Holocaust really happen? Why do people believe the Holocaust was a hoax? Regarding Israel and Zionism, why do people hate or oppose the state of Israel? And what can be done to solve the age-old hatred of Jews? Lev concluded that ChatGPT had provided generally correct answers regarding Jews and anti-Semitism. ChatGPT's and Bard's interfaces, they are similar. The only thing is, in ChatGPT, you send a message, and in Bard, you enter a prompt. I studied multiple responses for both bots to the exact same questions that Lev asked ChatGPT 6 months before. As compared to ChatGPT for January of 2023, ChatGPT for July 23 and Bard for July 23 also provided generally correct answers regarding Jews and anti-Semitism. But in July, both ChatGPT and Bard provided additional educational suggestions and more specific commentary on the Israeli-Palestinian question. So you might be wondering how the responses contrasted. Coming back to my point about the datasets that are used to train AI bots, it's probably because Bard is powered by a different language model than ChatGPT and uses different sources of data to construct its answers. And this means the rival chatbot doesn't always approach the question it's asked to respond to in the same way, which makes the Google Bard versus ChatGPT head-to-head all the more interesting. And these sorts of hidden and overt nuances will continue to change as the tools and technologies continue to evolve. But don't despair. I was thrilled with the questions asked after I presented my virtual interview with Henry Ford at the annual Scholars Conference on the Holocaust and the Churches earlier this spring. These might give you some ideas to ponder with your department or office mates. For example, a programmer worried about the ethical and technical issues that arise from the use of AI models in higher education. Several instructors discuss whether or not generative AI should be banished from the classroom or used as a new tool to enhance student learning and creativity. An administrator wanted to know how to start using ChatGPT and other emerging AI applications. A researcher questioned the long-term impact of AI-generated content on future studies regarding disinformation, as it tips the balance for modern anti-Semitism. In conclusion, if you want to find out more about AI in general, I recommend this very short introduction to artificial intelligence by Margaret Bowden. My investigations led me to draft this list of points to help me evaluate AI tools. Do your best to determine the AI training datasets, as they do make a difference in the response you get. Consider the algorithmic rules that might be used in light of the developer's or provider's intentions. For example, we all recognize that Google is ad-driven. Stay current with what's going on in the digital world from an end user's point of view. try new technology releases and test relevant applications. Do your own homework too by researching reviews and follow trending topics that are of interest to you or are relevant to your practice. Some ideas for helping cultivate IAs in the light of AI in academia sprang to my mind also. Find out if you can or should use an AI policy. This is what Steve Jacobs and his students at the University of Alabama collaboratively developed. Quote, I certify that I have not used ChatGPT or any other AI tool or app in the writing of this research paper other than as a background informational source and cited in my bibliography, end quote. Review alternative responses and use multiple tools to tease out nuances and advances. Appreciate that fact that AI-generated responses vary due to randomness built into the algorithm, changing data being added into the data lakes over time, and changes made by users to their original prompts. Hone your skills as a prompt whisperer. As Jim, the AI whisperer, says, quote, AI will turn average writers into good writers into amazing ones, and amazing writers into prolific ones, but it will make bad writers worse than before. If you're not familiar with Warren Berger's work, I highly recommend A More Beautiful Question, The Power of Inquiry to Spark Breakthrough Ideas. As he explains, quote, an ambitious yet actionable question can begin to shift the way we perceive or think about something and might serve as a catalyst to bring about change. And finally, as Malcolm Gladwell explains, little things can make a big difference. Obviously, knowing how AI is trained, we might help tip the data sets against anti-Semitism by contributing works to the primary repositories used. Common Crawl, Wikipedia, books, articles, documents, and content scraped from the open internet, for example. You may recall that the tipping point has to do with aspects of epidemics, like the AIDS virus, crime in New York City, adolescent suicide, heroin addiction, and I'd add now, AI-generated anti-Semitism online. The central idea explains the possibility of sudden change brought about if change occurs in any two of these three agents of change. The law of the few notes that exceptional people spread the word. This past June, our own Charles Asher Small took a delegation to the Vatican to meet Pope Francis and attend a conference on artificial intelligence and ethics. The stickiness factor shows that we can make contagious messages memorable. That's why Jewish organizations are investing in billboards to fight anti-Semitism. They have the potential to reach people across demographics. The power of context explains that human beings are a lot more sensitive to their environment than they may seem. For example, ADL's walk against hate is not just a walk. It's an opportunity to move as an individual, family, or community towards a future without anti-Semitism, racism, and all forms of bigotry. I'm sure you can name many other examples. I'm going to hit the wrong button there. Oh, goodness. Sorry about that.
Cool picture.
There we go. So the power of context explains that human beings are a lot more sensitive to their environments than they may seem. So I'm sure you can name many other examples, but we can talk about AI in this context during the upcoming discussion session. Like any form of propaganda, AI spans the spectrum of consequences of its use and abuse. AI affords us tremendous advances in medicine, public safety, the environment, and so on, even as the rapid spread of artificial intelligence, AI, sparks doomsday predictions ranging from mass layoffs to the end of humankind. Although you probably don't need to be concerned about being replaced by AI, you ought to be concerned about being substituted by a human who knows how to leverage AI. This is why every IA's thinking and experience and wisdom needs to encompass current knowledge of AI and emerging technologies. Like any major technological advancement, the impact of AI will be mixed. But whether you like it or not, AI is here and here to stay, says Forbes. But with responsible development and use, AI can vastly improve our world. Thank you.
So, thank you, Christine. So we have 10 minutes, so Naomi.
I'll try to be really brief. First of all, this was like really, really great. And I think for me, and I have to make this a safe space. I've never actually tried ChatGPT, so I have all these ideas about how I might go through write a Henry Ford interview in the classroom. But I have a question. So did you ask Henry Ford, first of all, like follow up with a question like, well, if you're not an anti-Semite, why did you accept this medal?
No, that never even, here's the point, right? I came across Hello History as a chatbot, right? And so I looked at who I could talk to on this, right? And Henry Ford's name came up, right?
Right, but I guess what I'm wondering, like looking at this, because I don't know enough about this, I was thinking, well, is Henry Ford in history supposed to be answering the way Henry Ford would have answered? Because there's sort of two different things. I mean, one person sort of going in there and manipulating, but on the other, like Henry Ford probably would have said those things.
I'm sure he would, but you've got to understand how the language model works, right? It's not making a selection, I'm going to answer it this way or that way. It's just going into this giant XD billion pieces of information, and it's just creating those answers on the fly, right? They're not sitting there.
A persona.
Sorry?
It's not creating a persona. No, it's like
well,
a magnet.
it is a persona because it's Henry Ford. So when it goes out to answer whatever somebody asks about it, it's going to just look at everything about Henry Ford and it's just going to make it up, right? So I didn't practice my questions, right? I was so taken by this, and I thought, well, I must ask him something, and it was just actually very spontaneous, right? So after that, actually, I went to have a conversation with Napoleon Bonaparte, and I asked him, I said, now, what have you got to tell me about Maurice Joly? So Maurice Joly is the French individual who hated Napoleon, and he wrote a whole treatise on the devil and in a discussion with Machiavelli, and eventually he was imprisoned for that, right? And that became the biggest base of what went into the protocols. The Russians, police got it in Paris and took it back to Russia and so on. But the reason I bring this up was when I started that conversation, I asked him what he had to say about Maurice Joly, and he said, oh, he's a lovely fellow, yes, he's wonderful. And I said, really? Don't you remember you imprisoned him? I said, that's not a very good answer, could you try again? And he says, oh, I'm so sorry, I see you've done your homework. So I mean, you just, I promise you, there are so, Perplexity.ai, which is another chat thing I use. Personally, I like that on my phone because it's so simple. And it just says, ask anything, and it also has a little thing so you can talk to it. And it's not going to bite you. The more you actually just try it, really. It is all you have to do. And that is so important because it's around us. And if you don't try it, you're going to have no idea what's going on with what your students are up to, right? But also, you'll act. The most thing I found that's really important is to start with something you really know, so that you can pick up on what it's saying, right? Because otherwise, if you know nothing about Henry Ford, he sounds rather plausible. I found that other photo of him getting the Grand Eagle Prize, and I thought, never mind. So there you go. Don't be afraid. Just dive in.
Marilyn.
I'm wondering if either of you have good resources to recommend for anti-Semitic based bias in Wikipedia? Because of course that
Yeah,
is our students' most beloved
Yeah.
source.
Well, there's a very important paper that specifically focuses on essentially proving how biased the editors are in Wikipedia when in discussing anti-Semitism, in bringing that up in that way. So I can give the reference. I will be happy to share. The slides have got a lot of links on them, and I'll happily share them with people, so you won't have to scribble.
Now I will just add recent paper by Jan Grabowski. He wrote how editors are editing biased and false information into Wikipedia, and then people consume it and they assume it is real. It's about Holocaust denial.
Yeah.
And when you read it, it kind of, it's not just entire lies. They use real names, real dates, and so on, but they do it in a manipulative way. So people will be educating themselves through Wikipedia to deny or distort the Holocaust.
Can you put those in a website?
Yeah.
So we have like a minute left. Any questions? Denise?
Are there like any resources that you recommend, that you suggest, that you support as to find that surface and basic information? Like she said, that students typically like to go to Wikipedia first. Where would you say to go first? I know there are tons of textbooks that we could send them to, but if someone if a student wanted to just kind of get some quick information and not go to Wikipedia, is there another resource?
Listen, it's not a question of not going to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is really good for a lot of things, a lot of fact stuff, right? But whether the facts are going to be correct or accurate or non-biased in particular domains, such as the ones we are here to discuss, that's another story. So actually, and here I'm putting on my grade school teacher hat. I used to teach middle schools and so on. And I think that actually giving an exercise to go and find find examples and then discuss and say what you think, the student think about how that is positioned, right? Because then you're actually making a positive effort. It shows that they can use something, but you cannot say don't use Wikipedia. I would never say that. That people have to be so much more aware of the bias, and they have to look for it. But if they can find it, then they're going to stop. Then they'll say, "Oh, I can find more like that," right? So okay, then now how do you then find one that's done effectively and make a comparison? There's so much one can do to help students really embrace it, but embrace it with care and thoughtfulness.
I'll ask you a little more one-on-one, but just a preview of what I'm going to ask about. To the layperson like me, perhaps, how would I be able to recognize manipulative or biased language? So I'll ask that later.
That's a good question. Howard?
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'll take it on
So when we talk about, let's not talk about anti-Semitism for a second, but about propaganda and disinformation and maybe Soviet active measures, so to speak, or American political warfare strategies. So the way like spy agencies design disinformation and misinformation is that they get it about 90% right, logical, and they insert the things that they want you to kind of learn, which is not true, in it. So most of it seems legitimate. So there's a tremendous problem to the common people to know that stuff they see are false. So this is and it's all about online orientation and knowing which sources to use. So you can say don't go to Wikipedia, but do like a slightly harder job and go maybe to Google Scholar, right? Search the topic. Okay, don't read the whole paper, but read the introduction.
It's
because it has peer review.
It's more a question of going elsewhere to support what you find, right? That's terribly important.
So, okay. Anyways, so thank you both very much. It was a very important subject matter. Yes?
talk to Napoleon III, not Napoleon Bonaparte. That's important.
I just I wanna say one thing. So this is a very important subject, and this is I guess the new frontier. But I just want to remind everybody, when we look at the history of anti-Semitism or racism, we all look at power structures, right? We look at how Europe colonized the world for its benefit, and we look at how philosophy, theology justified all sorts of things. We look at, how fascism used sort of corporate advancement, right? Fascism and corporate control of the economy of society was paramount to the rise of Nazism, etc. We look at all these things and we have debates. And yet when it comes to the contemporary context, a lot of the work, which is excellent, and this was an excellent presentation, I would argue it's somewhat descriptive. It's important to describe the context. It's an important element of, to understand the context. You examine aspects of society, and some of the work has to be empirical. There was some wonderful presentations here. But the question is, where does power come into this? Power in society and how it's distributed. We live in a moment historically where corporate control of our society is paramount, right? Facebook, Microsoft, all these companies that are pushing this, technology, and technology can have useful benefits, and these corporations are driving the advancement of technology, which has all sorts of benefits in healthcare and the economy, and there's wonderful parts to it. But when hate becomes part of the free market of ideas, when there is no corrective measures that are permitted in society, when where corporations are hiding under the First Amendment, right, to allow hate to seep into the platforms that we consume, where we get our knowledge. We're not getting knowledge now from universities, we're getting all this information, and people don't have the time in this fast-paced society to go and check sources for information. It's being pushed. Information without knowledge and without wisdom. It's dangerous. So how does power come into this? When the Jewish community, these are rhetorical questions to think about, we don't have easy answers. But when the Jewish community in the United States is begging the corporations like Facebook and other platforms to stop the hatred, and Elon Musk and Zuckerman, all these people are saying, well, these are free, it's a free market economy, there's a free speech, etc., etc. So the power of groups concerned about racism and sexism and homophobia and anti-Semitism, we don't have the power. We don't have the power to make much of a difference in this context, especially when all these domains, or most of these domains, are based in the United States because of the First Amendment. In countries like Canada, Germany, Israel, and France, and other places, there are some limitations on free speech when it's targeting, inciting hatred.
But the power of ISGAP is something I do want to
The power of
address.
ISGAP, boy, against Microsoft.
Just hang on, give me a chance.
No.
No, I'm serious.
No, trust me. I went to the Vatican, as you said, and there was a group of rabbis from Israel and imams from the Middle East. It was like Muslim Jewish people, a few scholars and professors of ethics were there, and the president of Microsoft and Google and all these all these leaders of industry were there. And the gap in the room, first of all, of understanding the implications of AI. We don't, the people that were supposed to be there, on the moral side of things, we didn't know what we were talking about. We don't know. The gap, so, these are very serious challenges, and I would argue if you want to fight or understand issues, the dynamics, the processes of socioeconomic, political processes, power plays a key role in this. And how, as scholars, do we understand the evolution or the development of corporate power and the rights of citizens? And are there contradictions in this in our society? It's a question, but I think very important to understand. On this note, it's coffee time.
No, but one thing we need to have to change is that there should be classes already in school to teach people about the dangers and how to work with it. And that is something.
It might be too late.
Then, like with other things in the past.